next mentor is Tara. She's a writer, editor, and a founder at Bound, which provides skill building creatives for writers' retreats, workshops, writing, coaching, and editorial services. Bound has also conducted an engaging mentorship in creative writing with Unheard. I invite you, Tara, to share your career experience and your thoughts on a career in creative writing.
Thank you, Dikshita, and thank you, Alistair. So it was really fun interacting with all of the Unheard students for our creative writing mentorship program. And I think we created together some very interesting projects. So I will just share my screen and can you stop sharing this?
One,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll do that.
I will just share my screen and I want to take you through my career journey and I want to sort of demystify, careers related to creative writing. Because we always think, uh, oh, even my parents, when I told them, I'm interested in reading and writing, they were like, what can you do with that? And then I started my exploration and figured out that, stories are something that we need. Stories are the way that we communicate. And we will always need storytellers. So if you can become, and if you love ideas, love creating, stories, if you can think from the point of view of a reader, of another person, if you can really think about how your stories are impacting others, what are the emotions that they are invoking in others, then you have a long way to go. Because every single startup, every business needs storytellers. We are watching stories all the time. We all watch TV shows, we are watching stories all the time, we are reading stories all the time, we are telling stories all the time, and all of us are storytellers as well. So thinking about creative writing in that broad format is very, very useful, and there's actually a lot one can do if one gains these skills. So let me start off with a little bit about my own career journey. Okay, so I actually didn't study creative writing, but I was always interested in English literature, in writing, in reading, all of those things. So I actually went on to look at the publishing industry, and I wanted to get an insight into, what that means, because I've always been a book reader, right? So I wanted to understand how are books actually made. Who are the people that are behind this industry? Who are the decision makers? How do editors and writers work with one another? So I was very interested in this industry, and that's where I started off. For this industry, I did a couple of internships at publishing houses, and then I actually studied publishing at the Columbia Publishing course. Then what happened is that I started working at a publishing house. I worked at Penguin Books, where it was a really great job, because at a very young age, I got to work with very senior writers, help them put their stories and voice out into the world. But I realized I wanted to do something a little bit more. And that's where, I wanted to diversify my skill set. So I wanted to explore the other things that one can do if one is a lover of words. Because I'm always happiest in the world of words, and I'm sure many of your kids also just love being lost in the world of words. So I wanted to explore, what are the other opportunities, and what is sort of a upward trajectory that I can take with something that I love. So I went off to explore journalism, and I'll speak a little bit more about each of these fields. And there's no limits for you as a journalist. You can literally reach the stars. And then I saw that there was a lot of people like me who had also been very confused. As you can see, I've done a lot of different things, who also, like me, who are very confused as to, I like this particular field, but there's not that much education about it. Parents may not be as supportive as, whether if I was to become a lawyer or an engineer. So what is it that I can actually do? And that's why I started Bound, which was basically to help people build their skills in creativity and understand how to upskill themselves if they want to go into creative industries. So through Bound we conduct a lot of workshops, and we recently even started a podcast. We also offer editorial services, so we help brands with their content writing, and we help authors with editing their books, because we're a team of people who, as I said, love words, love being in the world of words, and that can actually translate to many many different things. It doesn't have to be confined to writing a book. So what are the different things that you can do? I already spoke about traditional publishing, that is the book industry. So a lot of people want to enter the book industry as editors, but you can also go into the book industry as a marketing person, as a PR person. All of these things require similar skill sets. So it's very interesting to actually ask your child. And I remember when I was also starting out, I dabbled in a lot of fields. I did a lot of internships to find out where my particular skill set is suited. But what I'm trying to say is that in all of these different fields that I've listed out here, you need a similar mentality, and that is you need to be a storyteller, and you need to understand what makes stories great. What are the emotions that stories evoke in other people? How do I communicate a particular thing effectively? So it's all about actually communication skills and being able to articulate yourself in writing in a very structured and professional way. So creative people, grammar is always impeccable. Brains, I always say, brains are chaotic and energized, full of hundreds of ideas, brimming with different stories. And the work follows a certain format, is professional, um, you know great writing skills, all of those things. So it's not only that I want to be a creative writer and I can limit myself, I can go into journalism. We all know that there is massive scope for that industry. But there is also PR, public relations. So in my work with Bound, we actually helped a lot of authors take their books to the market. We also wrote PR press releases, all of those, personal branding. All of that requires storytelling, because what you're doing essentially is you're communicating a brand's vision, you're communicating it, maybe an individual's vision, to the market. So you are communicating their story to the world. Similarly, with advertising, you're communicating what a brand stands for, you're communicating something about that to the rest of the world. So it requires a lot of creativity, coming up with captions, coming up with campaigns. All of those things all are in the market of storytelling. So broaden your vision. If you think broaden your vision of what creative writing is, because creative writing essentially is all kinds of stories. If you are a good editor, I started off as a book editor, you can be great at writing taglines, you can be great at writing content for websites, for brands, because you understand what makes a piece of writing interesting, you understand what makes a piece of writing vibrant, you understand how readers and consumers respond to things that you write. You understand how, as I mentioned, to evoke that emotion. In marketing and advertising, you're always trying to evoke a certain emotion. You want somebody to see your product and think, oh, happy, healthy. How do you convey that story? How do you write those captions? How do you sort of put a campaign together? So I would consider, if I'm into creative writing, and I work with a lot of interns and even some of my employees who've actually studied marketing and mass communications, uh, because it all goes hand in hand. Okay, so this is sort of a very creative industry, and I would say there's a lot of scope for this, because you know uh, lot of scope for this, maybe not in publishing. So in the book industry that I spoke about, that's a very small industry, and sort of it's very difficult to enter that industry. But once you enter, you, as I said, you really work with the best. I mean, think of all the people who are writing books, think of all the people who are putting their work out there. Who knows, you may get to be Priyanka Chopra's editor. But but it's a very tiny industry, so it's very competitive because of that, and the growth trajectory is very slow, so it's a very sort of rigid industry. So only enter that industry if you're very confident and you're willing to sort of wait and work your way up. Obviously once you reach a certain level, you know, the pay scale and all of those things will go up, but as an entry level, um you know, difficult to enter and may not be the highest pay. However, you know, that in terms of the experience and the kinds of people you work with and all of those things, um, that is very great because it's very very competitive to enter. I always tell people, if you want to enter the publishing industry, don't try and enter as a book editor. Try and enter, you know, as somebody who can help the company with social media. Maybe try and enter as somebody who can help with marketing, you know, and then work your way up within this industry, because you're still sort of working with stories and you're telling a story to sell a story essentially. And that is an easier way to enter into this field. In terms of, you know, content writing, communications, there is immense scope, because as I said, every business, every startup needs somebody to be able to tell their stories to the world, and so those roles just open up for you. In terms of the education, you know, it obviously requires study, but I would say it requires more practice, because even when you're getting hired and all of those things, it's very important to have that skill set locked down. It's very important to be able to convey your it's very important to have impeccable grammar, for example. It's very important to not only be creative but be able to structure an argument, because you're trying to, you know, if you're a journalist, if you're a book editor, if you're a content writer, you're trying to write pieces, you're trying to put together content that is very effective, that is easy to read, that invokes a certain emotion, that surprises your reader, that is very interesting. So all of those things, you know, can only come with practice. I remember when I was in college, I did a lot of informational interviews. So I actually went and I met sort of, you know, what sort of like unheard, but I sort of did it on my own, where I actually went and met a lot of these professionals, you know, either in journalism or in publishing. And I asked them, you know, how do I become better? How do I become a better storyteller? And the number one thing they said, obviously, you know, above doing the course or whatever, is that practice, because you are going to get hired on that skill set. So, you know, especially for sort of publishing and the publishing industry, you need a lot of internships. So you need to sort of show that you've worked somewhere, you've actually produced a piece of work. If you have a portfolio already, that is amazing. Because, you know, since it's a very writing intensive and communication is very very important, it'll be very difficult for somebody to hire you without sort of a vetting process. So most often you'll be given sort of a test. It'll be either a grammar test, you'll be given maybe a product that you have to write about. You'll be, I remember when I was going for my journalism job, they actually told me to write a story and come up with different angles. So you will be given a test, and I really think that the only way to ace that test is by practicing. You know, so if your kid is in college and they're studying whatever it is, you can, and also another thing is that you can go into this field after studying whatever you want. There is no real compulsion to go at, if you want to be a journalist, that you have to study journalism, or if you want to go into publishing, that you have to study publishing. There's no real compulsion. You can even, you know, be a BA in psychology or history or economics and go into these fields, because as I said, what really matters in this is the internship experience and the skill set that you may have picked up. So what can you do to pick up those skill sets? You know, run your college newspaper, start a newspaper, start a magazine, you know. um, Courses aside, do the internships. The internships matter a lot in this industry. You know, if you do an internship with a brand, say you do an internship with Unheard and you write 10 blog posts for them which do really really well, that's your portfolio. I did an internship at a think tank and I basically wrote around 90 articles for them. And that really helped me get my job at Times of India, because I could show that I had already done that work. I could show that I knew how to write something. I could show that I knew how to put together an argument, to narrow down a topic. All of these skills that companies are looking for, very important to not only study, so read, think critically, do all of those courses, but actually put into practice. I would very much suggest that. Even for anybody that I hire, I always look actually for that experience versus what they studied. So, to sum up in terms of scope, traditional publishing is very difficult to get in at an entry level. There is not that much scope. If you are patient enough and have the wherewithal to stick it out and grow, it may take 5-7 years to get where you want. Then it is very much worth it because you work with the best. Journalism, we all know there's a lot of scope. I would also consider going into PR, advertising, content writing, and anything to do with marketing, because marketing is also storytelling. And to sum up, you know start encourage your kid to just explore, because anyone who's interested in storytelling is crazy. And I mean that in a great way, because they are very creative, they are brimming with ideas, they want to experiment, they want to try out different things. So combine that creativity, combine that energy with that practice, with that professionalism, and you're going to get a lot of interesting things that are out there. We all run on stories, so there is never a reason why this will go out of fashion. uh, so that is how I want to end. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Tara. So we'll be having our Q&A round at the end. So yeah, parents, you could note down your questions that you would like to ask Tara. And Tara, thank you so much for pointing out that it's better to explore different fields, different opportunities before you settle down for one. It's quite important to explore your career before you settle down for something. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to share my screen.